Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. On 15th of August, just a few days from now, there would be the completion of 3 years rule of Afghan Taliban in Afghanistan. Back in 2021, they took over the presidential palace and swiftly took over the swathes of the territory of Afghanistan. And ever since, what has transpired, how the situation in Afghanistan has unfolded. The Afghan Taliban have been unable to fulfill the major promises they made with the international community in the Doha Peace Accord, including of not allowing any terrorist group to take safe haven on the Afghan soil and carry out its nefarious activities. Also, the formation of the inclusive government and also upholding the human rights. All these promises the Afghan Taliban made with the international community remain unfulfilled till date. There are a number of United Nations reports that talk specifically about the kind of threat and the kind of space these terrorist groups actually enjoy in Afghanistan, the kind of threat they pose to the region, the neighboring countries and the world at large also. One of the reports talks about the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, the Fitna al-Khawarij being the largest terrorist group operating in Afghanistan, and the kind of support and assistance it gets from both the Afghan Taliban as well as Al-Qaeda. And also one of the other reports talks about the seriousness of the threat ISIL-K actually poses to the region. Also that particular threat being projected beyond Afghanistan. On the other hand, what we have seen is there is a continuous pattern and a trend of denial on the part of the interim Afghan authorities, with its spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid once again saying, let me quote, "The geography of Afghanistan is under complete control of the Islamic Emirate and no foreign or domestic rogue groups are allowed to operate," unquote. Meanwhile, we have seen Pakistan's permanent representative to the United Nations, Mr. Munir Akram, regarding as to the relationship between Pakistan and the de facto authorities in Afghanistan and the situation over there is concerned, has said that Afghanistan is our neighboring country and we have to resolve the issue of terrorism and we will, unquote. Let me quickly bring in our esteemed panel of guests, talk about this particular pressing issue Pakistan is faced with, the other neighboring countries are faced with because of the situation that is unfolding in Afghanistan and the kind of responsibility the Afghan Taliban have to fulfill as per the international commitment. We are honored to have been joined in the studio by Mr. Nasir Ali Khan, his former ambassador. Mr. Khan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Also in the studio, we are honored to have been joined by Mr. Zamir Awan, he is senior analyst. Mr. Awan, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Also at the same time, on the phone line, we are honored to have been joined by Brigadier retired Nadir, he is senior analyst. Brigadier Mir, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Let me begin the discussion with you, Ambassador Khan. When we talk about, let's start with this particular statement that has come from the interim Afghan authorities spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid, saying the geography of Afghanistan is under complete control of the Islamic Emirate and no foreign or domestic rogue groups are allowed to operate. How do you look at this statement? Does it hold any sort of water?
I think it's a very unrealistic statement to say that groups like especially ISIS, Khorasan have been eliminated is I think a gross exaggeration, as you can see by their activities. On the other hand, there's no doubt in my mind that they are not a very large organization. The estimates of the number of people in Afghanistan are between 2,000 and some say as little as 500. But the important thing is that there is a potential for these people or these groups to actually grow. Initially, you see, these are not ISIS that kind of parachuted from Iraq or Syria, where originally ISIS or ISIL took shape. But they are actually groups which primarily were hardliners within the Afghan Taliban. There were more extreme groups within the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan also. So those people who were disillusioned, disgruntled with their leadership, primarily thinking that these people are not strict enough or dogmatic enough, those were the people who left their original organization and became the ISIS Khorasan. The ISIS Khorasan simply pledged allegiance to ISIS and ISIL in Iraq and in Syria. But the important thing is now that the Afghan government, which is now a national government and has many challenges before it, you mentioned Mr. Munir Akram and his statement. One of the things that Mr. Munir Akram has said recently is that policies evolve with a change of government, which is important. We cannot expect them under these conditions to change overnight their policies. Then there is the question of the culture of Afghanistan itself. For instance, you mentioned women, the fact that beyond 6 standard to this day they have not been able to give them education. There's curtailment, freedom of movement, and this is something which in the long run, I'm sure the Taliban themselves know, is going to be harmful for the country. Because just to give you an example, if you don't educate your women, in a few years' time, you will have no lady health workers. And you know, ladies who get ill cannot be attended to by men. So this is just a small example. But coming back to the ISIS Khorasan, a very important point is that as a government, the Afghan Taliban need to be pragmatic in many cases. And this is something that plays against them, because that's what alienates some of the more extremist elements within their own ranks, who can then go on to join these people.
Right, Mr. Awan, what's your understanding by looking at what has transpired over the last 3 years in Afghanistan after the Afghan Taliban took control there, after the international troops withdrawal, looking at these statements which show there is a pattern and a trend on the part of the de facto authorities in Afghanistan. How do you see how the things as far as counter-terrorism, if there were any efforts on the part of the Afghan Taliban, had unfolded?
The worrisome thing is that Doha negotiation, Taliban has ensured that the Afghan soil will be not used against any country and there will be no terrorist activities. Unfortunately, that I believe it is the recent statement by Afghan Foreign Minister was a political statement that they have control all over the Afghanistan. It is just a political statement. They also know the problems there, but we should also have a realistic approach that Afghanistan is in trouble for last 50 years. Since 1970s, terrorism started. The fabric of Afghan society is a tribal society. Every individual tribe is a leader. Every individual is a leader, and they want to implement their own agenda. Some of them might be good, some of them might be wrong, some of them very hardliners, some of them maybe moderate. But under these circumstances, understanding the Afghan society and the culture, it is very easy to understand that terrorism and extremism existed there for a long time. How to handle it? Afghanistan itself is a victim of terrorism. But what we have the concern that Pakistan should not be the victim of Afghan terrorist activities. Pakistan is suffering. Our security forces are suffering. Very often, our Nojwan, our Jawans and soldiers and security forces personnel are killed or martyred, and I mean this is something worrisome. I believe that we should have a very good approach how to solve it. On the first hand, negotiation, dialogue. This should, in diplomacy, negotiation is the modern weapon of a modern civilized world. We should not give up the negotiation and engagement with the Afghan government. Secondly, that we should strict our own borders. We should deploy our more security forces. The route we should cut off, not only the physical routes, also we have social media, we have the telecommunication, we have the banking channels. I mean, all the tools which are supporting the terrorists, we should cut off. And Pakistan is getting day by day better in controlling these things.
Okay, let me proceed towards Brigadier Nadir Mir. Also, Brigadier Mir, what's your understanding as to the situation? What has transpired under the Afghan Taliban rule in the last 3 years since they took over Kabul, especially when it comes to their commitment to the international community that they won't allow the Afghan soil to be used by any terrorist activity. Ever since Pakistan has witnessed a resurgence of terrorism, Pakistani authorities asking them number of times to take a concrete action against banned TTP, Fitna al-Khawarij, but there has been a pattern of denial on their part. Your understanding, sir?
An undeclared war of terror is being waged on Pakistan's western border. And there are three components of this. One is the terrorists themselves, who are attacking Pakistan through multiple means. Second is the Kabul regime, who is coordinating or not controlling them, or partly guilty or wholly guilty. That can be debated. And the third is, of course, the foreign power hostile to Pakistan, in this case, which is India, which is playing the new chapter of the great game, according to Indians. Well, Pakistan has to have a response and to become proactive. It needs a three-pronged proactive policy. First is dealing with the terrorists. The terrorist bases and safe havens and the logistics have to become a nightmare for them, because if it doesn't, then they will continue as has happened the last 3 years, as you've just said yourself. So Pakistan has to project a full spectrum policy of retribution across its western border. And this is not only a kinetic operations, this can be in multiple forms. There are so many ways. That's why I use the word full spectrum. Second is the Kabul regime. The Kabul regime, which is the Afghan Taliban, that is, they have to be dealt with through deft diplomacy. But diplomacy is both carrot and stick. I mean, it's not just talk. So Pakistan has to offer all the largesse of geoeconomics. My book, Gwadar on the Global Chessboard, suggested linking them with Gwadar. And there are so many other facilities of Pakistan, which Pakistan has offered. Previously, it can offer more to facilitate the Afghan regime, that is, of Kabul regime, that is. And if it doesn't work out, since every day you've seen Lieutenant Rozair Shaheed one day before, and so many other Pakistani soldiers. So then Pakistan has to cobble an anti-terrorist coalition against Kabul regime, along with the rest of the world, which is going to the UN and so many global bodies. Because it is not only Pakistan which is apprehensive or worried about this terrorism scourge flaring up in Afghanistan, but Pakistan is the one that is being attacked at the moment in the big way. And third, of course, as I mentioned, is India. India has to be dealt with by a policy of deflection. Since India has linked Kashmir and this region, then Pakistan has to answer back, take steps proactively in India's backyard, as you see, which is Bangladesh and Myanmar and that side. You know, the Indian media has gone berserk because of what is happening there. So Pakistan should support Bangladesh in all multiple forms. We have good relations with Bangladesh. And I wrote an article, which is Bangladesh and Geopolitics, because that region is now India's vulnerability, the chicken neck of the Siliguri corridor and Nepal and Bangladesh and northeastern states, Assam, and so many other steps are there, you know, and there is a great potential for great parent rivalry. Then there is Cookie Land, which is a Christian state. I'm just highlighting that there are so many factors factoring in eastern India, that side. So get the Indians busy here so they don't have time or resources to bother us in Afghanistan.
Okay, Brigadier Mir, keeping in view these particular statements, this is not the first time such type of statements have come forth from various leaders of the Afghan Taliban. Now the spokesperson of the de facto authorities saying the geography of Afghanistan is under complete control of the Islamic Emirate. No foreign or domestic rogue groups are allowed to operate. That is a clear-cut denial. So in the light of such denials, what then could be done as far as Pakistan addressing the threat that is emanating from the Afghan soil? Pakistan has been the victim of in the last 3 years.
Pakistan has to not only take all its measures, but Pakistan has plentiful resources to deal with Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a landlocked country, partially bulk of its trade and transit is dependent on Pakistan and partially on Central Asia and partially on Iran. So, and those are the states that are also affected, as I said last time also. So the regional states can be aligned because nobody wants terrorism, neither the Central Asians, nor the Chinese, nor the Iranians, nor the Russians, and or for that matter, not even the Americans. Remember what happened in 9/11 and where it happened from. So Pakistan, United Nations is there, and as you yourself have mentioned, and the whole world knows the United Nations and the world bodies are reflecting, all those in the know of it, initiating the subject, that Afghanistan is once again a haven for a big terrorist forces or forces growing larger. So you have regional and global consensus on that, and that is what you can cobble and chisel together so that you are able to take actions in various multiple fields against the Kabul regime. That is globally, they seek recognition, so they have to be denied recognition. They seek, economics. Tell me, how does it things move out of Afghanistan or move into Afghanistan? From land borders, it has no sea. So they can be curtailed and UN sanctions can be imposed. And ultimately, if they don't understand this language of peace and harmony and Pakistan's 5 decades of generosity and, for the Afghan brothers, then they have to be declared a terrorist state. And there's so many of the world nations who will do it.
Right. Brigadier, may you please stay with us. Let me proceed towards Ambassador Khan once again. Ambassador Khan, once we talk about these recently released reports by the United Nations. Now, there was an earlier question by one of the leaders of the de facto authorities in Afghanistan raising a question regarding the credibility of these reports, the sources of the information, and they continue to say that those sources seem to be biased and this is a clear-cut propaganda against the interim Afghan authorities. How do you look at that?
Well, they should not have this kind of paranoid attitude. They shouldn't think that the world is against them for no apparent reason. But as far as Pakistan is concerned, I think it's very important that we continue to pursue a diplomatic solution bilaterally, regionally, as well as internationally. The gratifying thing is, as you see in the UN report, there is a unity in the international community to not only handle this problem together, but to recognize that it is a problem. As far as our bilateral relationship is concerned, I think it's very important that we realize the compulsions, the limitations of the Afghan Taliban government. To say that they control the whole of Afghanistan is obviously unrealistic. Unfortunately, when they came into power, there were half-hearted promises that the government would be inclusive, and somehow that never came about. It's 3 years. So it's very clear to me, if you go back decades, even centuries, Afghanistan is run by a set of warlords, groups which are ethnic groups. And then, of course, there's the Shia-Sunni issue also, which is not a very large one, but it has an overreach and it has a shadow on Iran also. Fortunately, the Afghan Taliban government has reached out to the Shia community in Afghanistan and tried to improve relations with Iran. Now that is another bone of contention. There is another disagreement on this between the ISIS Khorasan and the Afghan government, because the ISIS Khorasan has been directly targeting the Shia community over there. But as far as Afghanistan's government is concerned, they are very well aware of our capability of hitting them across the border. So there's no doubt about that. However, as far as I'm concerned, the response should be measured, it should be moderate, and it should be infrequently used. We don't want to inflame sentiments over here. If you go into Afghanistan and you talk to the ordinary Afghans, they don't have a good impression about Pakistan and Pakistan's government.
So when you talk of those promises, half-hearted promises, by the Afghan Taliban, those promises that they made in that Doha peace deal?
Yes, and when they first came into the government, there were half-hearted promises that our government will be inclusive. And one had the impression that maybe right now they can't figure out who to include, but within the next few weeks or months, there will be, Uzbeks and Tajiks, the so-called Northern Alliance, included. This is very important for the unity of Afghanistan.
So, don't you think the Taliban should actually have that basic realization that once they try to include more and more ethnic groups in the formation of an inclusive government, the situation for them to govern Afghanistan would be much easier as compared to now being trying to be the exclusive?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't remember a time when the central government in Afghanistan held sway over the whole of Afghanistan. There was a tacit understanding with the warlords, with the different ethnic groups. They all were agreed on a certain government in Kabul. But if you have a government which is hostile to you, you're obviously going to cooperate with your enemies, and you are going to look for opportunities to damage that government. So in my opinion, that's very important. But coming back to Pakistan-Afghanistan relationship, I think we must stay focused on the fact that it is in our interest to have a stable and prosperous Afghanistan. Afghanistan has tremendous potential. Now, the Afghan Taliban are actually fighting those more extremist groups. We need to help them in this fight.
But that is, hasn't Pakistan been supportive of that very idea of a peaceful and a stable Afghanistan? We saw the peace and reconciliation efforts, after which the Doha Peace Accord was also struck between the United States of America and the Afghan Taliban. Pakistan has always been desirous of a peaceful and a stable Afghanistan. Even now, after the Afghan Taliban took over, there have been a number of times the Pakistani authorities have offered them, if they have lack of capacity, Pakistan is ready to help them out in order to take a concrete action against the terrorist outfits over there. So isn't it incumbent upon the Afghan Taliban, if they lack capacity, if they want assistance, they should ask for it?
No, if you
keeping the track record of Pakistani authorities, that Pakistan has always been supportive on a number of fronts.
I agree. But if you blame the Afghan government, Afghan Taliban government, for each and every incident and all the problems that occur, as far as attacks on Pakistan are concerned, you see, the main bone of contention right now between us is that it is our opinion that they provide safe havens to the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. And they continue to do this, right? Now, we have to make them understand through negotiations how this is counterproductive for them as well. Because you see, they have an old historical and ideological connection with the TTP. They were together in fighting the occupation of Afghanistan. When ISAF and NATO forces were there, they were both fighting together against this. So they feel obliged in some ways. On the other hand, there is this possibility that they might consider it a convenient tool to use against Pakistan, because Pakistan is a more powerful neighbor. So you can't take a head-on collision with them, but you can use certain proxies to hurt Pakistan or to threaten Pakistan or to blackmail Pakistan.
To get what?
To get your way. I mean, for example, you are saying that when there are activities across the border, we should go and hit them, right? So to prevent themselves from being hit, to have a tool or to have a sort of lever which will make Pakistan think twice, you see. But our job is to make them understand that this relationship has to change. If you want to be part of the international community, you have to have more pragmatism in your approach. Otherwise, the international community, it's been 3 years, they refuse to recognize you. There is a major humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. So despite the World Food Program and all these agencies being there, they are only able to provide about 12% of the assistance that is required over there. So clearly, the Afghan government and the Afghan people cannot survive without international assistance. And in order to get that assistance, they have to be responsible, they have to be part of the international community. It's the job of Pakistan to talk bilaterally, to involve the regional players, and then to go on the international forum. You know how the discussions have been held in the Security Council vis-a-vis the terrorist problem in Afghanistan. So this is our job, to work with them on this, to understand their compulsions, and then to try to convince them that this policy is harmful for you and for us, you see.
Right. Mr. Awan, Ambassador Khan already alluded to the fact that there is unanimity when it comes to the international community, the kind of threat that we see emanating from the Afghan soil under the Taliban rule. Now, there has been discussion on different fora regarding that particular thing at the United Nations also, but we have also seen the discussion, deliberations regarding that particular threat happening on the regional forums also. The Moscow format, as well as under the auspices of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Most recently we saw the Taliban were invited and they participated this time around in the Doha 3 format. So looking at these developments, do you have an understanding that there is a clear-cut unanimity when it comes to all the major powers or all the regional powers when it comes to addressing the situation of terrorism in Afghanistan is concerned?
I have a different approach. First of all, that Pakistan concern is only that Afghan soil should be not used against Pakistan. The terrorist activities based from Afghanistan should not harm Pakistan. That is our concern. How we achieve it? I think that instead of making it more internationalized and involve the Western powers, it will complicate the situation more. You know, the 20 years occupation of America and 10 years Russian has already messed the Afghan society. So we should not involve the whole international community. Instead of this, we should make the format of the local or regional approach. That is, all the neighbors of Afghanistan should unite and negotiate with the Taliban. And even that, if there is a need for recognition of Taliban region by the neighborhood or regional powers, I will appreciate it. This will provide us more space to negotiate and engage with the Taliban
But what's
government.
the guarantee, even if the regional countries go for recognizing the Afghan Taliban as the legitimate rulers there, so what is the guarantee that they are going to fulfill those unfulfilled promises? Isn't that recognition, because of this particular trend on the part of the Afghan Taliban, is going to embolden them? Perhaps they are going to think that this is the right strategy. Perhaps through this we can pressurize the regional countries and get whatever we want.
Without recognizing the Taliban government for 3 years, what we have achieved, let's try change our course of actions and approach, and let's see the new way. Maybe it will work. I'm not sure. Who will guarantee? There is nobody. And even that, the Western world will never like to stabilize the Taliban government. They will always try to destabilize the Taliban government. This is the fact. So we should have the different approach, that is the regional approach. The neighboring countries, we are the affected, we are the victim of Afghan turmoil. So we should come forward.
So if that option of giving recognition to the Afghan Taliban comes onto the table, where ideally should that particular idea be initiated from?
I think that OIC is a good platform. The regional neighborhood countries are the good platform. SCO is a good platform, and Russia and China are always supporting the Moscow format, and the Chinese foreign minister has made the trilateral quadrilateral negotiation. I mean, these are the good platforms. Why we have to involve UN? You know, the UN, what happened in the Israel, in the Gaza, Israel is not obeying the UN Security Council's resolution. They say it is not the binding. So their reputation is already, nullified. And American and the Western world is not serious to stabilize the Taliban government. They want to destabilize. They want to prove that the Americans were better than ruler than the local Afghan Taliban.
Okay, let me take this particular point to Brigadier Nadir. Brigadier Mir, when you already talked of that policy of carrot and stick, when we talk about the international recognition of the Afghan Taliban, Or do you think it could be used as a carrot for them, and to what effect? And is there any sort of a guarantee once the regional countries collectively think of recognizing the Afghan Taliban as the legitimate rulers of Afghanistan, they would be able to fulfill all those unfulfilled promises?
First of all, the Afghan government has to stop this terrorism which is happening in Pakistan. Right now, it's not happening in Iran or Central Asia, though there are groups and they have ambitions and proxies also, and in China for that matter. It's happening in Pakistan. So you have to have a base for anything. We want to recognize Afghanistan. We are pro-Kabul, pro-Afghanistan. We have been supportive of the Afghan people for the last 4-5 decades through various turmoil and all that. But the fact of the matter is that as of now, proxy forces, militant terrorist proxy forces are attacking Pakistan. And Pakistan is the only country being regularly attacked in a big way on a regular basis from Afghanistan. So that problem has to be solved first, or it has to be solved along with it. Recognition comes later. How can you recognize somebody who is party to or guilty or suspect of attacking you? How can you recognize? Why should you recognize? And secondly, do the Afghan, this regime or any other regime, do they accept the Pakistan-Afghan border? If they don't accept the Pakistan-Afghan border, how does Pakistan accept that country? You know what I'm talking? So I'm talking about the western border of Pakistan. So the point is, we want to support Kabul regime. We want to support the Afghan government, and we should do it in a bigger way in future, along with other countries. But it has to be reciprocal. It can't be one-sided. And as far as a proxy, Pakistan does not have to get embroiled in fighting proxies. I'm a geopolitician and talk at the global level, and I've written books on this. You see what Iran has done. Iran has created its proxies, and Israel has got embroiled in it. And finally, it is coming to war with Iran, Israel-Iran war, I mean. So the point is simple. Either the Kabul regime or Afghan regime has to be it's interested in friendly relations with Pakistan, or it's interested in hostile relations. They have to decide. We want to be friendly with them. We want to be friendly with the whole world, actually. But attacks on Pakistan from Afghan soil have to cease, one way or the other. Diplomacy is the best, or other means that you can adopt.
Brigadier Amir, what about securing the border? We saw the gigantic exercise of fencing the border also. So how to make the border along Afghanistan more secure? Do we need any sort of international support or assistance in that particular regard?
Of course, you can secure the border more, but as events in 7 October in Israel and all over the world, you can have any border and attacks still take place. You see what has happened recently in Ukraine, Russia, stalemated war. The Ukrainians were able to invade right till Kursk, and so on. I mean, somebody wants to go across the border, it's a determined opponent of force. It can do it, if not today, maybe tomorrow. So besides doing all the things that Pakistan has to do at its end, the issue is that there is another party, and that party is Kabul, and that party is Kabul. And the terrorists in Afghanistan. So they have to be dealt with. If you can deal with them diplomatically, geoeconomically, that's the best. I said that initially, that's the best thing to do. But if it doesn't happen, and there's to be a timeline, you can't have every day a young officers and soldiers falling shaheed, or a civilians for that matter, Pakistanis I mean. And Pakistan is attacked on its western border on a regular basis. This has to cease one way or the other. So all the discussions we can have and we will have for Afghanistan's betterment. And obviously we want a stable and prosperous and a friendly Afghanistan. We want to support them in every conceivable way. But there cannot be an attack from that country or from any country to Pakistan whatsoever.
Right. Getting Mir, you already mentioned of India. We saw India being the peace spoiler at that particular time when the Afghan peace and reconciliation efforts were underway. Now you mentioned, when we talk about the funding, the proscribed organizations or the terrorist outfits based in Afghanistan might be getting from India. How to address that particular thing? Can that issue of India's involvement in creating trouble in Afghanistan and subsequently for Pakistan be taken up at the United Nations? Is there any sort of way forward to address that particular issue?
Absolutely, yes. Because India is not only guilty of terrorism through Afghanistan into Pakistan, it has been doing assassinations abroad. The Canadians have accused them, the Americans have accused them, and there are so many other places that the Indians have been guilty of. I mean, that is public knowledge now. There is no secret about it. So you can go to the United Nations, you can go to global forums and regional ones, and there are so many court of justice and so many other places. Take the Indians to court and to other forums and expose them for what they're doing. That is one. in Afghanistan. But that will not stop them because they are playing the old great game. That's why I suggested in your program a few minutes before that if they're playing a game here, then the geopolitical game can be played in their backyard in the East, which, by the way, if you see Indian media, hear the Indian media, the social media, that is why they've gone hoarse crying themselves because they are fearful of that. So even in India, I would say we should have peaceful relations with India. We should offer peace to the Indians. But if they persist with this, then we can also do things much more.
Right, let me take this point to Ambassador Khan. The role of India in creating trouble as far as the Afghanistan soil is concerned. What's your understanding about that and how to address that particular problem when it comes to Pakistan securing its national interest?
I have a video of the National Security Advisor of India, Ajit Doval. He's addressing some gathering in India. And he's clearly saying that we will hit Pakistan through proxies. We will provide funding to the Baloch. We will provide funding to our friends in Afghanistan. So it is absolutely clear, and I agree 100% with Brigadier Mir that we ought to be more vocal about it, and we ought to approach every possible forum to expose India that in fact it is a terrorist state. And once we manage to establish that, it will be a completely different picture. As far as their policies are concerned, if they were popular within India, you could see that as a result of the previous elections. So this kind of belligerent attitude, this bullying, this hegemony in the region is not even popular among the Indian public, especially when you talk to somebody who's educated and worldly wise. They realize that these extremist and export of terror and policies like this are definitely going to harm India in the long run, not only in terms of its image, but in terms of its economy. Because if you live in a neighborhood which is fraught with all kinds of terrorist activities, and then you expect foreign direct investment to come, if I were an American and I had my hard-earned honest money that I wanted to invest in India, these prospects of war and terrorism and two nuclear armed state, and you are playing a dangerous game over there, I would not invest my money in India.
Right, Ambassador Khan, recently we saw the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also talking of Indian involvement in an assassination that took place on the Canadian soil of a Canadian national. Also, there was an assassination attempt that was plotted by Indians from India on American soil also. So that was also brought to the light by the American administration. Do you think after that, of course, the long-held stance of Pakistan about India's state sponsorship of terrorism was pretty much clear. Did you see any substantive action on the part of the Western world, particularly Canada and India? Or is exposing India just sufficient?
Before I carry on, I think you forgot to mention that they accepted that they have killed 20 individuals in Pakistan, on Pakistan soil. Their defense minister actually had the gall to say that we will do it again if we need to do it. This is clearly the words of a terrorist state, you see. So at the end of
the question is, they've already been exposed. So
yes,
what it would take to stop them?
There are two things here. Why is it that the United States did not take more severe action in such a case? The first thing, of course, is, as you well know, their policy has shifted, and they have several security alliances and economic alliances, and India itself is a huge potential market for them. So they have to be a little cautious in how they treat India. But at the end of the day, it's not the government of the United States and their response that will make a difference. It is the people of the United States who will not want to deal with a state that carries out international terror.
Terrorism.
And therefore, they will not be doing business, they will not be bringing investments over
A point very well made. Mr. Nasir Ali Khan, former ambassador, joining us in the studio. Thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. Mr. Zamir, Awan, senior analyst, thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. Unfortunately, we are short of time and I'll have to end the show over here. On the phone line, we were joined by Brigadier retired Nadir, senior analyst. Brigadier Meet, thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.